So now I will give the floor to Alicia Mattoni, that was to leave earlier. So then immediately after Alicia's comment, Donatella will reply.
Thank you, Donatella, for the presentation and especially for the book that I know will be published soon, as you said. I think it is a very important book for many reasons. I will list some of them very briefly because then I have my criticisms, of course. So first of all, what I liked about it is that it is linking current anti-austerity movements to previous waves of mobilization. That is something that usually in social movements studies it is not done. So we always speak about having a diachronic perspective, but we seldom find studies and books and publication with a true comparison. And so we tend always to see the newness of a movement where actually there were trends that were already in place in previous ways of mobilization. So because you link these struggles with struggles in the labor and realm, I think this is also very important, because there was a narrative going on about these anti-austerity movements, claiming that they were spontaneous, they were not organized, that they were basically something coming from nowhere, and instead the more the time passes, the more publication we have, and this book is part of this group of publication, we discover what we probably already knew, that there were already groups of activists working in the shadows in the previous years, and that helped a lot, you know, the creation of these waves of mobilizations. I also think that it is very interesting what you do, linking the debate on political economy, and I would also say also in political philosophy, because you also use some political philosophers in your book, to social movement studies. And I like this very, very much, and I think that in social movement studies we constantly need to open ourselves to other fields that can tell us, can suggest us better new directions and ideas for analysis and so on. Related to this, you mention, and here I enter the stage of criticism, you mention two relevant aspects that you derive from political economy and political philosophy in order to understand current movements, but also past movements. First of all, you speak about the temporalities of capitalism, and as you also showed here, and you mentioned these three temporalities, the long term, the middle term, and the short term. And related to these, I think this is something that can really be useful to understand the development of social movements in the past, but also and especially in the present. But I have a couple of brief questions related to this. First of all, thinking about social movement studies in which we also speak about temporalities, what I would like you to develop more in the discussion is how would you link the temporalities that you mention in capitalism and the temporalities that characterize social movements. We speak about epochs of contention, we speak about cycles of contention, we speak about events of contention. Here I have in mind the work that you know very well, actually I knew it through you, of Sewell, and you use it in your work as well. But here I didn't find, you know, an open and explicit discussion of the intertwining of these two temporalities, the temporalities of social movements and the temporalities of capitalism. Also, probably because of lack of space in the book, you discuss them. You discuss them at length in relation to the anti-austerity movements, and my impression is that you focus especially on the middle term temporality of capitalism. Of course, this was not the focus of your book, but this is a discussion that I think goes farther. So what about the long-term temporality, and so also having in mind past social movements, and also more interesting for me also the very, very short-term temporality of capitalism and the link with events, protest events, specific protest events in current and past social movements. The second set of concepts that you think can be useful for the analysis is instead related to the spatial dimension of social movement, or the spatial dimension, of also capitalism. And so you mentioned the distinction between periphery, semi-periphery, and the core. And here, again, it is very important, and we see it when we compare current anti-austerity movements. I think it is very important to understand that although they are part of the same wave, they, of course, are linked into specific geopolitical structures, and these render them slightly different from one another. But I was wondering if this center, periphery, and semi-periphery classification that you use referring to countries, if it makes sense still today. Because I think that we can see at work these three dimensions within the same country. And not just, envisioning the world as divided into these three blocks. And this was also something that we could find, I think, in the discourses elaborated by the so-called global justice movement, when they spoke about, and still speak about, the global south and the global north. I think that the reference was exactly to this blurring of the periphery, semi-periphery, and core. Related to this, you speak indeed about the social basis of those who mobilize in anti-austerity movements. And I was thinking is if these, they are mainly belonging to the middle class to some extent, a middle class that profoundly changed with respect to the previous epochs of contention, and probably this social basis is the semi-periphery, so they are not the completely dispossessed, so the periphery. They are not, of course, the elite, but it's the semi-periphery of within each country that is kind of mobilizing and taking the lead in this mobilization, and then involving also other groups and social formation. So this is about the two big dimensions, so the temporal dimension and the spatial dimension that you use in your analysis. Then I have another point that is linked instead to a classification that you propose when you link the kind of movement and the type of system of production that is in place in societies. And you suggest that if Fordism can be related to the labor movements in the past, then we have post-Fordism, and this can be related to the new social movements. And finally, we have neoliberalism and its crisis, and we have the anti-austerity movement. Even I think that it is a useful scheme in order to simplify what we see at work in society. But I was wondering why you decided to stress post-Fordism as a way of production, as characteristic of the new social movements, as one of the characteristics of the features of the new social movements, and then neoliberalism, that is a way of governance instead. It is not specifically a system of production, but is rather a way of governance. And you stressed the presence of this way of governance for the anti-austerity movements, because my impression rather is that post-Fordism and neoliberalism and its crisis developed in parallel, but you decided to stress post-Fordism as the basis of the new social movements, or better, what was there when the new social movements developed, and to stress the presence of neoliberalism for the anti-austerity movements. So I was wondering why you made this decision. And I would have many, many other comments, just the very last, about precarious workers and that were also present in anti-austerity movements. There are some thinkers and commentators that says that today speaking about precarious workers and the precariat doesn't make sense anymore. Because, as you also stressed through your data, we are all precarious in a sense, even those who are already, that have open-ended contract, they are precarious, and this was really clear with anti-austerity measures. So my question would be for you, but also for the audience, of course, is if we say this, if we state this, that we are all precarious, don't we risk to overlook the social stratification that in any case characterize also these anti-austerity movements? Or it is better to use this encompassing label, we are all precarious workers, because for the analysis it is better to point out the commonalities. And I stop here.
Thank you for the praises, but I will focus on the criticism. And to a certain extent, I will take an easy way out, in the sense that, especially on the first two comments, what I did in the concluding chapters, which I didn't distribute, is to say we need much research on this, and especially we need comparative analysis, because what I did was exploratory, attempt to build on what was going on. But first of all, I think that when analyzing movements which are quite young, so the 2011 movements, you always have the problems to see what reflects the external conditions and what reflects just a stage in the development of the movements. And this I briefly mentioned about the morality and political type of frames. These movements developed in situations of lack of political opportunities, but they, to a certain extent, created these opportunities. In the beginning, maybe just producing the fall of center-left parties that they no longer considered as allied. But in the long terms also, if you look at Greece or at Spain, they produce an earthquake, or the situation produced an earthquake, and they were agents in this, in which in Spain bipolarism was dramatically weakened, so the big parties both have lost a lot, and political parties like Podemos got 8%. Now there is Ganemos at the municipal election with very chances to win the situation. Syriza became a first party. So it seems that political opportunities have changed, not only because of the social movements, but social movements played a relevant role in singling out the target in this type of parties and in producing these. European elections also indicated that in the countries in which there was more movements, there were political consequences which opened up. And this, the impression is producing changes also in this movement towards a more pragmatic and political view. And so the temporalities I single out in terms of looking at the type of broad development of capitalism, middle range and short term, I think they need to be connected to this type of development of movements. What I did for the moment in this book was especially to focus in comparative terms to the alternance growth and crisis, to compare systematically global justice movement in early 2000s, development of neoliberalism, growth of neoliberalism versus the anti-austerity protest. But now indeed I need also to, and not just me, I hope someone else will do this also, to look at the other arrow also. What do this movement produce in terms of changes in the political system, accumulation of resources? In Spain there is this mareas, the waves, which are an interesting phenomenon in terms of organizations of users and workers of public services, and I think this is an open space. And other things also, which I say in the concluding chapters, is we need more systematic comparison of the core, the semi-periphery and the periphery, and probably also to be more specific about these categories. Already Soskice and Hall's varieties of capitalism has been criticized as too simplistic and focusing especially on the core. And if you start to look at the differences in economic terms, first of all, the semi-periphery is for sure a very broad concept, because the semi-periphery is Tunisia or Egypt, but it is also Portugal, Spain, or Greece. And so it means it is complex insides. And when we look more specifically at the contingent dynamic of the crisis, some of these countries had a crisis which was mainly led by public debt, Greece, for instance. Other countries were model of reductions of public debt, and the crisis was especially related with private debt, like in the Spanish case or in the Irish case. So I think that these are also relevant dynamics. In also, what we have to see, we are starting to look at it now, is 2011 was the rebellion of the pigs of the Portugal, Iceland, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. 2013 was protest in the BRICS. So it was protest in the countries which were considered to be the most dynamics. Brazil was one of these cases, but also Gezi Parks in Turkey, which came from development. So also there to see which are the more systematically the characteristics is relevant. And here I think also there have been attempts to go beyond the simple categories of varieties of capitalism and core, semi-periphery and periphery. And this links with the other element of the social basis of these groups in terms of fragmentations of the basis in terms of precariat. I would consider more like good standing as a sort of general conditions. In terms of an actor, I think it is too different to think that it could organize in the same ways. You have studied it. There is a precariat made of people with very high educations, and there is the precariat made of migrants with no papers, with no recognitions, illegal migrants. Of course, the forms are different. What you see in this protest is that it is, in fact, not the illegal migrants who protest, but at the same time, I wouldn't see them as those who are in the semi-periphery, so to say, because they are the people directly affected in many cases by the economic crisis and so on. Research on the unemployed movement had shown that those who mobilize more the unemployed who mobilized are more those who had previously had jobs in big factories, so who have resources. And if you look at the movements on housing, afectados para la hipoteca in Spain, of course there are also people who have resources. They are not the poorest of the poorest. But at the same time, there is in these movements something different from movements of the past in the mobilizations of those who are directly affected by the crisis. So not just a sort of group of supporters, but with different degrees, the mobilizations, since Iceland was one of the first cases, of those who were directly affected. So not the most, but still affected. So the hypothesis that they are middle class has never convinced me. And I would stop here.